Shuvaprasanna, R. Kumar, Jayanta Sengupta, and Sampurna Chakraborty will be in conversation with Sumona Chakraborty. Sumona Chakraborty is the founder of Hamdasti, a Kolkata-based arts platform for socially engaged arts practices. She currently heads the Delhi Art Gallery's museum programs. Over to you, Sumona.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Warm good afternoon to all of you. Thank you so much for being here. We're so happy to be back with the Kolkata Book Fair. I mean, all of us are feeling like it's kind of a return to some form of comfort in these very difficult times. So it's so lovely to see all of you here. It's a very special occasion this year because we're celebrating so many important milestones. And one of them is the 150th year of Abanindranath Tagore. So today with me I have some speakers who actually, many of them don't need an introduction, but I will introduce them briefly. Very good afternoon to all of you. So first to Shuvaprasanna, who we are all familiar with, but he's an award-winning artist of international acclaim. His work features Kolkata in many of its colors and moods. He has more than 55 solo exhibitions in India and abroad and has created more than 7,000 paintings since 1975. He is a recipient of the Bongo Bhushan from the government of West Bengal. Good afternoon, Shuvada. Thank you for being here. Then we have Professor R. Shivakumar. Shivada is a noted art historian, curator, and author of more than 20 books, including the paintings of Abanindranath Tagore and Rabindra Chitraboli. He has studied the Masters of Bengal and Shantiniketan and was also a professor of history of art at Shuvaprasanna. Dr. Jayanta Sengupta is also here with us today. He is the secretary and curator of the Victoria Memorial Hall. He has previously headed the Indian Museum in Kolkata and the Anthropological Survey of India. Educated at Presidency College, Kolkata and at the Universities of Calcutta and Cambridge, he has taught history at Jadavpur University, Kolkata and the University of Notre Dame in the United States before joining the museum profession in 2013. And finally, Sampurna Chakraborty, an art historian, art history research scholar and writer. She graduated in history of art from Kolabhavan, Vishwabharati, and is currently pursuing a PhD. Her areas of interest are art institutional history of Bengal, art pedagogy, and 19th and 20th century South Asian art history. A warm welcome to all of you here today. So, Abanindranath Tagore is an artist who many of us know few things about, but perhaps we don't know the kind of deeper stories behind the accolades or the kind of stature that he holds in the history of Bengal art. So here with us we have 4 panelists who will of course help us examine some of the things we already know about him or some of the highlights of Abanindranath's contribution to Bengal art, but will also help us sort of look deeper into that and explore some of the aspects we probably are not as familiar with. So I look forward to learning so much today about this great artist and master. Before we start the discussion, we're very lucky to have with us here today Dr. Jayanta Sengupta because the Victoria Memorial actually has one of the largest collections of Abanindranath's works. And as the custodian of the collection, he has taken important initiatives like making that collection available on Google Arts and Culture for all of us to see in the comfort of our homes. But it's a real privilege to have you here, Dr. Sengupta, and if you could just take us through some of the artworks that we are already seeing behind us, which are there in your collection, and tell us about some of your highlights from that collection.
Thank you so much, Sumona. Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here in this session. Yes, I'm sort of daunted by this huge responsibility of being the custodian of what is easily the largest collection of the artworks of Abanindranath Tagore in India. We have 2 segments in this. Everybody knows that in 2008-9 we acquired on enduring loan. This is a loan. We don't own the artworks, but we had on sort of a permanent loan the entire Rabindra Bharati Society collection of approximately 5,100 paintings, of which something like 550 are Abanindranath Tagore's works. But before Abanindranath Tagore, before Abanindranath Tagore's eldest son, Alokendranath Tagore, gave away, this large collection of artworks to Rabindra Bharati Society, not the major part, but still quite significant part, which was left with the family, we already before the Rabindranath Society collection had a significant enough collection of Abanindranath Tagore's works, including many of his early works from the 1890s, about 60 artworks, which the Victoria Memorial purchased around the knots, around 2000, 2003, from Sumitrendranath Tagore and then Shyamashri Tagore. And some of these are on view here. So these are brush and ink sketches. There are watercolors. And I think, and then we added the 543, to be exact, Abanindranath Tagore works to the collection. So we now have, taking the two together, more than 600 of Abanindranath Tagore's artworks. And I would like to think, and of course, I am not an art historian or a scholar of art history. I'm just a custodian of those works. And the best art historians are already here. But I would like to think that the entire oeuvre of Abanindranath's creativity, some of his early works that we had before we acquired the Rabindranath Society collection, shows the playful side of him, like these sketches where he is actually addressing his granddaughter. I think it's Maya, one of his granddaughters, where he is painting himself as somebody who is having his hair dyed, or drawing the picture of his granddaughter, and with these funny captions like Didimoni, Dadamoni Didimoni chobi aঁকছে আর ভাবছে কবে দেখা হবে. Right? So the granddad is painting a sketch of his granddaughter and wondering when he would see her next. So these are like, I mean, there are two which are not represented here. There are two pictures of Mukul De. In fact, one is not of Mukul De. One is just a row of ants passing by a twig. And then there is a caption saying, Katpiprer Phoj jaচ্ছে Mukulke dante katte. So that's the kind of funny side of him. Another, you can imagine there is another sketch of Mukul De sleeping in the Jorashaka house, and the caption is Bhor Panchtaye Mukul Kumbhokarno. So you can imagine some person up at 5 a.m. in the morning and sketching this man Mukul De with those funny captions. So that playful side of him is here. And obviously we have the, if we can have the, like his famous series called Chitrakshar, where he is sketching around, painting, he is sort of animating the Bengali, the letters of the Bengali alphabet. So these are part of Victoria's own collection before we acquired the Rabindranath Society collection, which comes next in this series. If we can have the other crop of images up on the screen, please. And among the 543 paintings, all the major series that Abanindranath painted are all represented. I mean, there are the Krishna Lila series, which is one of his earliest works from the 1900s, and then his later works, the Krishna Mangal, and obviously the Arabian Nights, which is perhaps widely regarded as the best examples of his work. And out of 40 odd, out of 42 he painted, we have 36. And we could not do an exhibition that we are planning with Professor Siva Kumar here about doing an exhibition on Abanindranath Tagore and his world of the Arabian Nights. And that exhibition, I am happy to announce, will be on next year, sometime after January 2023. But we have a large range of landscape sketches of places like Puri, which Gaganendranath Tagore also painted so lovingly. So we have a series on Puri, we have a series on Darjeeling, we have series on Deoghar, Munger, and places like that. But my own favorite, and it was thrilling when we were mounting an exhibition on Abanindranath in 2015, which was curated by Professor Ratan Parinu and inaugurated by Shivada here, of seeing these famous paintings from up close. Obviously, you know, paintings like the Bharat Mata and the passing of Shah Jahan, but my favorite among the landscape paintings are the series of, I think we have around 22 of them, called the Shahjadpur landscape of this place in Dhaka, where he is sort of, one can clearly see that he is imagining, it's a lot of misty nostalgia that he's mixing up with these images. They're painted so lovingly. So I think now is the time where there is a great possibility of seeing Abanindranath Tagore's works, because in 1914, when the Indian Museum had its centenary, its painting gallery, newly inaugurated, as part of the Calcutta Art Gallery and the Government Art School expositions, the painting gallery was one of the most popular features of the Indian Museum. But nearly 100 years later, in 2014, the painting gallery of the Indian Museum was closed, and the Victoria Memorial had only one painting of Abanindranath on display in its now dismantled Calcutta gallery. But in 2015, we did a major exhibition in the Victoria Memorial, and a few months after that, I was in charge of the Indian Museum then, we refurbished the Indian Painting Gallery. So that gave the public for the first time to see the opportunity to see Abanindranath's entire range in action. One did not have to travel all the way to the National Gallery of Modern Art in Delhi, which has about 100 of its collections. So unfortunately, because of shifts in our gallery work and because of the COVID-induced closures, we could not show them, but I think once we reopen Abanindranath Tagore's works with the Arabian Nights exhibition, and now the exhibition that we had is up on Google Arts and Culture, but there will be a unique opportunity for people to see the master works in Victoria Memorial, of course, but also in the Indian Museum. So that's something to look forward to. Thank you.
I urge all of you to go and see the exhibition at the Indian Museum that's there if you haven't seen it already, and go to Google Arts and Culture. And of course, we look forward to the eventual Arabian Nights exhibition. It'll be a real privilege to celebrate this 150th year. So, like all the images that you showed, Dr. Sengupta, some of them are very familiar to us. We know Abanindranath as the founder of the Bengal school, or we know him as the creator of the Bharat Mata. And many of us also are familiar with Abanindranath from our childhood, because being in the book fair, he was also a master storyteller. So whether that's Nalok, or whether that's Rajkahini or Khirer Putul, some of the early images that we saw growing up of Abanindranath were in these books. And then later on, maybe we went ahead to discover this collection, though much of it, like you're saying, is not on view. So we've seen glimpses and bits of it here and there in an exhibition here or a book there, in Shivada's wonderful, stupendous volume of works also. Shubhada, I wanted to আপনাকে জিজ্ঞেস করতে চাইছিলাম, মানে এইদিকে we know Abanindranath as the storyteller, Obon Thakur, বাচ্চাদের গল্পের বই লিখেছেন, and then we know him for his other works and being the founder of the Bengal school. But এখন এই মানে standing here in 2022, how do you as a contemporary artist view Obon Thakur and his legacy?
Actually, I can speak English, but
না, please
why?
বাংলায়, হ্যাঁ।
Particularly Abanindranath Tagore, যিনি বাংলার জন্য এত কিছু করেছেন। আমি এইভাবে বলি, আমার যখন শৈশব, আমি অবনীন্দ্রনাথকে ছবির মানুষ বলে জানতাম না। আমি যখন ক্লাস 4-এ নালক পড়ি, সেই নালক পড়ে কি অসাধারণ বর্ণনা, সেই কুবো পাখির ডাক, পাঠশালায় বসে গুরুমশাই কিভাবে ছাত্রকে পড়াচ্ছেন। আমি চলে যেতাম কল্পরাজ্যে। সত্যিই তখনও জানি না অবনীন্দ্রনাথ ছবি লেখেন না গল্প লেখেন। সেই অবনীন্দ্রনাথকে অনেক পরে আবিষ্কার করি, যে অবনীন্দ্রনাথ আমাদের ঠাকুর ফ্যামিলিতে বা ঠাকুর পরিবারে দ্বারকানাথ ঠাকুর, তারপরে রবীন্দ্রনাথ ঠাকুর এবং তৃতীয় মহাপুরুষ তৃতীয় মহাপ্রতিভাবান মানুষ অবনীন্দ্রনাথ ঠাকুর। দ্বারকানাথ ঠাকুরের জন্যে আজকে বাঙালি ব্যবসায় যে কোথায় পৌঁছে গিয়েছিল সেটা কল্পনা করা যায় না। এবং ঠাকুর বংশের বলা যায় সবচেয়ে বড় প্রতিষ্ঠাতা দ্বারকানাথ, তারপরে রবীন্দ্রনাথ নিয়ে বলার কিছু নেই। এই বহুমুখী প্রতিভার মানুষ আশ্চর্য, এখনো অনাবিষ্কৃত। এখনো রবীন্দ্রনাথকে আমরা ভালো করে জানতে পারিনি। প্রতিদিন নানা মানুষ গবেষণায় রয়েছেন এবং পৃথিবীতে শেক্সপিয়ার, গোয়েটে এবং যদি দু একজন এই রকম বিশ্বকবি, বিশ্বলেখক থাকেন, তার মধ্যে একজন রবীন্দ্রনাথ। অবনীন্দ্রনাথ রবীন্দ্রনাথের থেকে 10 বছরের ছোট এবং রবীন্দ্রনাথ অত্যন্ত ভালোবাসতেন অবন ঠাকুরকে। অবন ঠাকুর একেবারে অল্প বয়স থেকেই অদ্ভুতভাবে জমিদার বাড়িতে শুধু পরিচারক পরিচালিকার হাতেই মানুষ। সে একটা অন্য জগৎ, তাদের সঙ্গেই ওঠা বসা। কারণ বাড়ির অন্যান্য কর্তা ব্যক্তি তারা এতই ব্যস্ত, এতই বড় মহল, কে কোথায় আছে, কে কোথায় কি কাজ করছে, কাকে কিভাবে দেখভাল করা যায়, এসব নিয়ে কারুর সেভাবে মাথা ঘামাবার ব্যাপার ছিল না। তাই অবন ঠাকুরের যারা পরিচারিকা, পরিচারক, তাদের সঙ্গেই তার সময় কাটত। তাদের জীবনযাপন, তাদের কথাবার্তা, তাদের দেশের কথা মন দিয়ে শুনতেন। আর কখনো কখনো বিশাল একটা টেবিলের তলায় যেসব একেবারে অসম্ভব ভালো দামি আসবাব, সেই আসবাবের তলায় উনি ঢুকে যেতেন। ঢুকে গিয়ে অসংখ্য জাল দেখতেন, সেখানে কারো হাত পড়েনি পরিষ্কার করায়, বিভিন্ন জালে ছড়ানো রয়েছে। আর অবনীন্দ্রনাথ সেই জালের মধ্যে দিয়ে তিনি স্বপ্ন দেখছেন কত কি। এই স্বপ্ন আর একটা শিশু মনি তিনি বড় হয়েও রেখে দিয়েছিলেন। অসাধারণ কাজ করেছেন। ছেলে বয়সে বিদেশি শিল্পী, তাদের কাছে ট্রেনিং নিয়েছেন, শিখেছেন কেমনভাবে বিদেশি শিক্ষায় বা ইউরোপিয়ান ঢঙেতে ছবি আঁকতে হয়। আমরা আশ্চর্য হয়ে যাই। এখনো পর্যন্ত আমি জোর গলায় বলতে পারি ভারতবর্ষের অন্যতম শ্রেষ্ঠ পোর্ট্রেট রবীন্দ্রনাথের, যেটা উনি প্যাস্টেলে এঁকেছিলেন। এর তুলনায় আজ পর্যন্ত আমি কোনো বিখ্যাত পরবর্তীকালেও কারো ছবি দেখিনি। সুতরাং সেই অবনীন্দ্রনাথ আবার নানা রকম লোকায়ত গল্প, নানা রকম পটের ছবি, পাঁচালি শোনা, এইসবেতে মশগুল হয়ে বাংলাটাকে ভালো করে জানার চেষ্টা করেছেন। সেই বাংলাটাকে জেনে তিনি একটা অসম্ভব রকমের ছবি করতে করেছেন সারা জীবন ধরে। আমরা যে ছবি ভিক্টোরিয়ার কয়েকটি দেখলাম, সেগুলো ওর মেজর কাজ নয়। সেগুলো বুড়ো বয়সে, অল্প যখন বয়সকালে হয়তো খেলার ছলে কিছু করেছেন, কিন্তু ওটার অবনীন্দ্রনাথ নয়। যদি তার শেষ বয়সের কাজ কৃষ্ণলীলা সিরিজ দেখা যায়, অসম্ভব ভালো ব্যাপার। এছাড়া কি ভারত মাতা, কল্পনা করা যায় না কল্পনা করা যায় যে এই রকম একেবারে বলিষ্ঠ ড্রয়িং এবং সম্পূর্ণ ভারতীয় একজন নারীর যে রূপ, এটা অকল্পনীয়, যেটা আমাদের কাছে চিরকালীন হয়ে থাকবে। এই অবনীন্দ্রনাথ আবার যেমন বুড়ো আংলা লিখেছেন, রাজকাহিনী লিখেছেন, ক্ষীরের পুতুল লিখেছেন, অসংখ্য। রবীন্দ্রনাথের 10 বছরের রবীন্দ্রনাথ থেকে ছোট এবং রবীন্দ্রনাথের সান্নিধ্যে থেকেও তার লেখায় এতটুকু রবীন্দ্র প্রভাব থাকেনি। কোনোদিন কেউ অবনীন্দ্রনাথের লেখা পড়ে তিনি যে রবীন্দ্রনাথের ভাইপো কেউ চিনতে পারবেন না, এতটাই স্বকীয়তায় তিনি উজ্জ্বল ছিলেন। শুধু লেখা নয়, আজকে যে বেঙ্গল স্কুল বা যেভাবে আস্তে আস্তে কয়েকজনের ইচ্ছায়, একজন হচ্ছেন হ্যাভেল আর একজন হচ্ছেন অবনীন্দ্রনাথ, তাঁদেরই জন্যে জাপানি ওয়াশ টেকনিক, যেমন ওকাকুরার ভাইপোরা ইয়াকোহামা ওরা এসেছিলেন, তাদের সঙ্গে যেমন চর্চা করেছেন, তারই পাশাপাশি তিনি একটা স্কুল তৈরি করলেন। ভারতবর্ষের আধুনিক শিল্পকলার একমাত্র বা জনক যদি বলা যায়, তিনি অবনীন্দ্রনাথ ঠাকুর। এবং পরবর্তীকালে তার ছাত্রছাত্রীরা সারা ভারতবর্ষে ছড়িয়ে পড়েছিল এবং তাদের নেতৃত্বে বা তারা যখন প্রধান অধ্যাপক হয়ে কাজ করেছেন, যেমন দেবীপ্রসাদ রায়চৌধুরী থেকে শুরু করে সকলেই কিন্তু একটা আধুনিক ভারতীয় শিল্পকলার প্রতিষ্ঠা দিয়েছিলেন। এটা যেমন আর এক। রবীন্দ্রনাথের ভাবনায় যখন শান্তিনিকেতন, রবীন্দ্রনাথ আহ্বান করেছিলেন এই অবনীন্দ্রনাথকে। তাঁরই হাত ধরে তাঁরই অত্যন্ত প্রিয় শিষ্য নন্দলাল বসু, এরকম মাস্টার মশাই, এরকম শিক্ষক, এরকম শিল্প শিক্ষক আমাদের ভারতবর্ষে দ্বিতীয় হয়নি, যিনি অবনীন্দ্রনাথের অত্যন্ত প্রিয় শিষ্য নন্দলাল বসু। আরও কথা বলা যায়, অনেক বলা যায়। আজকে যদি কাটুম কুটুম নিয়ে কথা হয়, যে কাটুম কুটুম আজকে যখন পিকাসো পরবর্তীকালে আমরা দেখেছি সাইকেলে বসার যে চামড়াটা, তার পাশে সাইকেলের যে হ্যান্ডেল, সেইটা দিয়ে মোষের মতন করেছেন। পৃথিবী জানে, কিন্তু অবনীন্দ্রনাথের যে কাটুম কুটুম, সেই কাটুম কুটুমে যে কি অসম্ভব কৌতুক, অসম্ভব ফেলে দেওয়া জিনিস থেকে একটা ভাস্কর্য, এর তুলনা হয় না। কিন্তু অবনীন্দ্রনাথকে কেউ জানে না। আমাদের পরবর্তীকালে আধুনিক শিল্পী অনেক নাম করেছেন এবং তাদের খ্যাতিতে পৃথিবীর সর্বত্র বলা হয়েছে। দেবদেবীর ছবি করেছেন অনেক শিল্পী, তাতে কোটি কোটি টাকা রোজগার করেছেন, কিন্তু অবনীন্দ্রনাথ কি করেছেন সেটা আমরা জানাতে পারিনি। আজ তার 150 বছরের যে জন্মদিন, সেই 150-এ অবনীন্দ্রনাথ, আমি কৃতজ্ঞ যে এই লিটারারি ফেস্টিভ্যাল, বিশেষ করে সুজাতা, যে তাকে স্মরণ করে এই রকম একটা আলোচনার ব্যবস্থা করেছেন। যারা অত্যন্ত জ্ঞানীগুণী, জয়ন্ত সেন, তিনি ভিক্টোরিয়াতে স্বাভাবিক অবনীন্দ্রনাথ সম্পর্কে নানান আলোচনা করেন, নানান বক্তৃতার আয়োজন করেছেন। আমারও দু একবার যাবার সুযোগ হয়েছে এবং তার কাছে যে সমস্ত ছবি আছে সে নিয়েও মানুষের কাছে বলেছেন দেখতে। শিবকুমার সারা জীবন শিল্পের ইতিহাস এবং সেই ক্ষেত্র শান্তিনিকেতন যেখানে অবনীন্দ্রনাথ ভিত গড়েছিলেন শিল্পের এবং শিল্প ইতিহাসকে জানার, সেই শিবকুমার আজকে রয়েছেন, বলবেন। আর ও তো রিসার্চ করেছে এবং বিষয় তার অবনীন্দ্রনাথ। কাজেই আমরা বিভিন্ন প্রজন্মের মানুষের কাছ থেকে 150 বছরের সেই মহাপুরুষকে স্মরণ করার সুযোগ পেয়েছি। আমরা যেন তার কাজ ছড়িয়ে দিতে পারি, জানাতে পারি বিভিন্ন প্রজন্মের কাছে, আর গর্বিত হই এই রকম একজন বিশিষ্ট প্রতিভাশালী শিল্পী লেখকের জন্য। রানীচন্দ আমাদের এত ভালোভাবে অবনীন্দ্রনাথকে তুলে ধরেছেন, সেই বই যেন মানুষের কাছে চলে যায়, তাহলে প্রকৃত ভাবে অবনীন্দ্রনাথকে বুঝতে পারা যাবে, উপলব্ধি করা যাবে। নমস্কার।
থ্যাংক ইউ শুভদা। আপনি সত্যি বললেন যে অবনীন্দ্রনাথকে আসলে কেউ আমরা জানি না বা চিনি না, বাট ওভার টু ইউ শিবাদা, যে one of the things we know about him is that he's the founder of the Bengal school, যেটা আপনিও বললেন। What do we not know about the Bengal school? একটা aspect হচ্ছে যে we think it's reviving history, reviving the past, but in what way was it radical? And Shubhada also mentioned a little bit how he was breaking away, or in a way was standing out from the rest of the Tagore family. So in your opinion, how do you think the Bengal school was a radical movement in some ways?
Sumona, just to let you know, 15 minutes left.
Well, you use the word Bengal school. We call it the Bengal school. In art, a school is something that grows around a master. The Bengal school was not different. It grew around Abanindranath. So one could speak about the school of Raphael, the school of Leonardo, and so on and so forth. So we have, in fact, we might call it also the school of Abanindranath. But most of the members of the school, which includes his teachers and his admirers, they were students of Abanindranath in the early years. We know that he taught from about 1905 to 1910. Then he became a little distanced himself from the college, and then by 1914 he had stopped teaching. So all these students who were with him during this period, especially the first 5 or 7 years, they were the backbone of the Bengal school. And what they carried forward was the early Abanindranath. The Abanindranath after 1910 or 14 was a totally different Abanindranath. Abanindranath was constantly evolving. He was constantly looking back at his work and making very important changes. In fact, if you look at his very early work and his very late work, like we had the reference to the Arabian Nights, we see that this has been a very, very long journey, and the two ends are as different as they can be. So what happens with the Bengal school is basically we have this early Abanindranath being propagated across India. But there is some significance. Maybe I would always consider Abanindranath much greater than the Bengal school, is much more than the Bengal school. But at the same time, we cannot just wish away the Bengal school. I mean, as probably people have done after 1940s. Maybe art changes and things go out of fashion, and there is sufficient reason for things going, I mean, out of fashion or less talked about and so on. But this was the first pan-Indian art movement. Because before that, we didn't have a pan-Indian art movement of any kind. We had a pan-Indian artist called Ravi Verma, but we didn't have a pan-Indian art movement. And also an art movement that you can say was an entirely Indian creation. I mean, Shantiniketan, which followed the Bengal school, was also in many ways an Indian modernism. But after that, our modernism and European modernism came much closer. I'm not saying that they should never come closer, but that is a fact. So you see something in this period that artists did, which was extremely rare in the history of Indian modernism, and that is something that is not recognized. Whether we like the works or not, I myself, to be honest, am not a great fan of the Bengal school. I am a great fan of Abanindranath, but not great fan of the Bengal school. But at the same time, its achievements are genuine achievements. I mean, we haven't thought about doing or establishing a school of modern art that has its roots here. And this was tried for the first time by these artists. There were few of them who stood out. I mean, of course, we already heard about Nandalal Bose, who actually also moved away from the Bengal school in many ways, but was an important product of the movement. There were others who picked up Abanindranath's approach and technique and his methods and did something wonderful. I mean, Hidendranath Majumdar would be one of those great artists who picked up what we call all the elements of the Bengal school and did something which was very personal. And it is, for Abanindranath, whatever he did, including his early work, grew out of his personal sensibilities as an individual and as a creative person. The school, of course, lacks that. That is where the master and the school differ. But I think that he helped create this genuinely Indian movement in art. I think that was his contribution as a teacher. And all those who followed him helped to bring it into fruition. And it was not limited to Bengal. It spread to the west, it spread to the east, to the south. So really we had artists who subscribed to similar ideas spreading across India and then becoming teachers in the art schools, or maybe just artists practicing like Venkatappa, for instance, who never taught. But they all contributed its spread from all the way from Bengal right through the south, right up to Kerala, for instance. Somebody like Madhava Menon, for instance. I mean, so, or if you go to the west, like people like Kanu Desai and so on. So it was something of an excellent, I mean, kind of effort by all these artists collectively that transformed, made Indians think of alternatives to the Western academic training that was the only thing that we had before Abanindranath came. So I think that's their main contribution.
Thank you, Shivada. As always, every time we listen to you, we learn something new about Abun Thakur. And through this discussion, we sort of explored Abanindranath, the storyteller, touched upon Abanindranath as a teacher, we've looked at him also as an artist who was constantly evolving, moving way past the Bengal school, and interesting also debates about which works of his are our own personal favorites. And we all have different preferences of what we think represents Abanindranath, but that really is a testament to the artistic journey that he constantly pushed himself on in his life and went way beyond the initial works that he did with Bharat Mata and more. But Sampurna, if you could tell us a little bit more about Abanindranath, the teacher, because that I know that you've been really looking into the archives and looking at Abanindranath's time as the vice principal of the Government College of Art. And that's also something that we hear about when we know about Abanindranath, that he was the first vice principal of the Government College of Art. So tell us about his time there, and then how this role as a teacher also evolved, and what legacy he's left behind as a teacher, really.
Thank you for this question, Sumona. I see I have very little time, so I'll try and make it as brief as possible, but it's a very, very interesting story. Here my teacher, Shivda, have learned most about Abanindranath and the way to look at Abanindranath through Shivda, obviously, so I will not get into the artist Abanindranath, but I would like to share with you certain anecdotes about the teacher Abanindranath and what happened to the institution, to Government Art College, after Abanindranath joined along with Hevel in 1902. It's a very, very interesting story when E.B. Hevel, who Abanindranath considers his guru, Hevel was the principal and Abanindranath joined as a vice principal. They together formulated a curriculum that specifically divided the scope of industrial art in Government Art College and the scope of fine arts in Government Art College. And that was the first time when a clear division was made in the two courseworks, one of industrial art and one of fine arts. During this, closer? Okay, is that all right? Okay. During this time, when Abanindranath was working with the students of the Government Art College, around Hevel started shifting and restructuring the collection of the Indian Museum. He almost started replacing the European examples of art that was there in the collection of the art gallery and replaced them with Indian miniatures, and this was a collaboration almost between Abanindranath and E.B. Hevel. Gradually, after a point, E.B. Hevel was not well, he went on leave. It so happened that Abanindranath had to single-handedly manage the Government Art College. And during 1904, 5, 6, the movement in the college, along with his students, towards forming a new language for Indian art had already begun. And in 1907, when the Society for Oriental Art was formed, it was gaining a separate life of its own outside the scope of the institution. And it was getting recognized in other parts of the countries, gradually in other parts of the world. So they had their exhibition in Paris and in London Victoria Albert Museum in 1914. That is when the British administrators started taking notice of the fact that, you know, this is a new group of Indian artists, because the concept of Indian individual artist was not really present until before then. So they saw an emergent group of Indian artists who is now exhibiting original works of art. And during Hevel's absence in the Government Art College, a larger portion, a larger responsibility was Abanindranath, though he was never really made the principal of the school. I've come across certain archival material where there are discussions in the House of Commons that if Abanindranath should be made the principal of the school, where there are discussions like, if he had been academically school trained in industrial art, we would have given him this responsibility. But since he's not trained in art, it's better he takes care of the fine arts department, and the main principalship should be given to someone else who is trained in academic art. So it was very interesting to observe how this was determined even during 1910, and to make way for Abanindranath in Government Art College, there was a discussion that given he is being considered as one of the prominent artists, that modern artists that India is producing, his college, I mean, his salary should be increased, and that is how we are going to recognize how he's contributing to the art scene of Calcutta, how he's contributing to the college or the development of college. So the salary increased from 350 rupees to 700 rupees. So that was a kind of negotiation. But what happens very interestingly, after Percy Brown comes and becomes the official principal, there was this constant conversation between 1911 to 1915, when Abanindranath finally left and resigned from the post of vice principalship. There was a discussion in retrospect that now, given that Abanindranath Tagore is resigning from the post and taking charge of the Oriental Society of Art, is it time for the British authority and the government to withdraw all the European art teachers from all the art colleges? Is it time that we reconsider what the art policy agendas are of the British government for all the government art schools in the country? So Abanindranath's phase, and this is a very long story cutting short, Abanindranath's phase and his presence in the art school really questioned at the heart of how education policy, British education policy, was determined in India, how it really didn't succeed in its own policies, in its own objectives, and how Abanindranath kind of questioned the role of artists within an art college, role of an art teacher within the institution and outside. And after Abanindranath's resignation from the art college, it was in Percy Brown continued till 1927, but after Percy Brown's resignation, because Percy Brown then joined Victoria Memorial as the curator in 1928, but then in 1928, Mukul Dey was employed as the first Indian principal of the Government Art College, and this only happened because Abanindranath questioned certain fundamental positions of Indian artists in the community. I hope I have been able to maintain the time, but thank you very much for that question. Yes.
Hello. Thank you so much, Sampurna Di, for condensing your very vast research into these few minutes. But there are so many more aspects of Abanindranath that I think are left for all of us to unpack, discover as we look at his art and we read some of his works, because his writing is also so beautiful and evocative. I just wanted to check. Yes, so we'll now take questions from the audience for our esteemed panel.
আমার নাম অপরাজিতা। আমি আর্ট বিষয়ে একদমই অনভিজ্ঞ। আমি শুধু শুভাদার একটা কথায় আমার একটু ধাঁধা লাগলো বলে আমি প্রশ্নটা করছি। মানে যারা মঞ্চে উপস্থিত, শিবাদা বা শুভাদা আমার মানে নিরসন করতে পারবেন, এই সলিউশন করতে পারবেন নাকি। সেটা হচ্ছে, শুভাদা বললেন যে ভিক্টোরিয়া মেমোরিয়াল কালেকশনে যে ছবিগুলো আছে সেগুলো নাকি ওর মেজর না, পরের দিকে কৃষ্ণলীলা সিরিজ বা সেগুলো ওর মেজর কিন্তু আমি যতদূর জানি, আমি ভুলও জানতে পারি, যে ভারত মাতা, সিন্দবাদ এবং শাহজাহানের মৃত্যু ইত্যাদি এবং আরও অনেক ছবি ভিক্টোরিয়ার কালেকশনে আছে, সেগুলো আমরা কেন তাহলে মেজর হিসেবে বলছি না?
আচ্ছা অপরাজিতা, যেগুলো দেখানো হলো এখানে সেই ছবি নিয়েই কথা হয়েছে, আমি অন্য ছবি নিয়ে কথা বলিনি। যেগুলো দেখানো হয়েছে সেগুলো মেজর কাজ নয়, এগুলো আমি জানি।
Questions from the audience?
Jayanta Babu.
I heard a question from somewhere.
Sumona here this side.
There.
জয়ন্ত বাবু, এই প্রশ্নটা আপনার জন্য। আপনি একটু বলতে পারবেন অবন ঠাকুরের am I audible? Okay, yeah. অবন ঠাকুরের যে আপনি একবার বলেছিলেন that he sought to modernize
the Mughal and Rajput styles to sort of counter the colonial Western idioms of art. ওইটা নিয়ে আপনি একটু আরেকটু বলতে পারবেন?
জয়ন্তদা আপনাকে জিজ্ঞেস করছে যে আপনি বলেছিলেন যে he sought to modernize or recontextualize Mughal arts as a kind of countercurrent to the colonial trends, so she wanted you to speak a little bit more about that.
Mughal art?
Yeah, Mughal and Rajput styles generally.
আচ্ছা, আমি সেটা নিয়ে কিছু বলেছিলাম কিনা আমার মনে পড়ছে না। আমি আমাদের কালেকশন নিয়ে কথা বলেছি। আমি যেটা বললাম যে যেরকম পাসিং অফ, ওর তো একটা তাজ সিরিজ আছে, তার মধ্যে পাসিং অফ শাহজাহান সম্ভবত সবচেয়ে বিখ্যাত। এটা তো তখন অ্যাওয়ার্ডও পেয়েছিল, 1911 সালে দিল্লি দরবারে দেখানো হয়েছিল। হ্যাঁ, মানে আমি ইন্টেলেকচুয়ালাইজেশন অফ মোগল ট্র্যাডিশন নিয়ে কিছু বলিনি, তাই নিয়ে আমার কোনো বক্তব্য নেই। আমার যেটা মনে হয়,
উনি যেটা বলার চেষ্টা করেছিলেন সেটা হচ্ছে যে আমরা যেমন পাশ্চাত্য থেকে সবসময় গ্রহণ করেছি, অবনীন্দ্রনাথ আমাদের প্রাচ্যের যে শৈলীগুলো ছিল সেই থেকে নিয়ে কাজ করার চেষ্টা করেছেন। আমরা যদি শাহজাহানের মৃত্যু দেখি বা কিছু দেখি, বা ওই মুঘল মিনিয়েচার বা রাজস্থান মিনিয়েচারে যে ডেকোরেশন দেখি, যেভাবে দ্বিমাত্রিকভাবে কাজ করা হয়েছে, সেই প্রভাবটাই উনি প্রভাবিত হয়ে চেষ্টা করেছিলেন যাতে প্রাচ্যের শৈলীকে আধুনিকতার দিকে নিয়ে যাওয়া যায়।
ওই প্রসঙ্গে যেহেতু ওই ছবিটার কথা উঠলো, সেজন্য আর আজকে সুমনা আমাদের মডারেটর লিটারেচারের কথা বলছিলেন বারবার, যেরকম ক্ষীরের পুতুল, আমাদের প্রথম পরিচয় তো ফ্রম দোজ বুকস। এটা সকলের ক্ষেত্রেই হয়তো সত্যি, আমরা প্রথমে অবনীন্দ্রনাথকে চিনেছি ফ্রম হিজ রাইটিংস। তো আমার যেরকম মনে আছে, দিস ইজ মাই পার্সোনাল এক্সপিরিয়েন্স, যে the first books by Abanindranath Tagore that I encountered as a child was Shakuntala, Khirer Putul, Nalok, etc. Kintu shegulo amar kache was broadly an extension of Thakumar Jhuli and Upendra Kishorer Ramayan, Mahabharata ityadi. And about reproductions of his artwork, the painting that I remember, which I saw in different in a printed form, was the passing of Shah Jahan. Or jeta I think I would like to say is that oi jokhon prothom ami Raj kahini pori, and it was an important moment for me because I came to know for the first time the experience of a poignant moment when, for example, in a huge expanse of desert land, at the break of a beautiful dawn, Prithviraj topples from his horse and dies. And that was a sort of rite of passage in my own childhood, because for the first time I came to know that this is the depiction of a beautiful place to die in. The poignancy of that moment, or the moment of the Princess of Solanki singing around the dead body of Bappaditto, those were important rites of passage in our children's lives. I mean, the first encounter with more mature emotions. In that case, passing of Shah Jahan was that moment in my life. Not Bharat Mata. Bharat Mata ছবি হয়তো আমি ছোটবেলায় দেখেছি, কিন্তু I did not really realize its significance. সেটা about Mother India এইসবের থিওরি পড়ার আগে আমি অত রিয়েলাইজও করিনি। But passing of Shah, because we were all bred into, we all grew up in an Indo-Islamic tradition of stories, like the Arabian Night stories. And passing of Shah Jahan was that moment of a poignant moment in which an aging Mughal ex-emperor who had built the Taj Mahal is the wistfulness of the poignant. These were encounters in Abanindranath's literature and art, which were transitional moments in my own life. So I just wanted to mention that.
And just final comments from Shivada, Shubhada, Sampurna, if you want to mention it. But I just thought that one thing about Abanindranath that really strikes me is the syncretism, how he's brought so many different cultures together, from Indo-Islamic traditions to Arabian stories, Japanese techniques, and that's almost utopic in some ways, to see all of this existing in one frame. And he presents that sort of utopia to us in these very difficult and divided times. So if you would like to just end with a brief comment on Abanindranath's relevance today and perhaps the relevance of this syncretism today, and then we'll wrap up the session.
We have 2 minutes, please.
Okay, that's a very big question. But I would say what really happens with Abanindranath is that, like we are talking about the Mughal thing, the Mughals were very close to him in sensibility. And for him, if you remember, the last Mughal emperor died just a little before he himself started off as a painter. So he didn't see this cleavage of colonialism separating it. So you can compare that with Rabindranath, who saw India's past as somehow distant. I mean, he reaches out to Kalidasa and not to the Mughal. He talks about, the Mughal rulers. He writes poems on the Taj, Shah Jahan, etc. But for Abanindranath, it was like yesterday. It was like your immediate forefathers. And he lived in that world in his imagination, and it was much more real. So it was very easy for him to connect with that past and take that forward. But he doesn't stay there. He gets into touch, as you said, with the Japanese, with the Persian. And for him as an artist, his training under the European teachers was foundational. And he never leaves that base of realism, but he builds on it. He improvises on it according to the contacts that he makes with other cultures. And he eventually sees that over 30 years, India is itself transforming. India itself is no more the Mughal India. It is much more. The space around his own house, around Jorasanko, that becomes a very eclectic space. And it is this eclectic space and eclectic culture that then enters something like the Arabian Nights. So he is constantly watching. You can see in his literature, he is sometimes in conversation with these people who might have lived 300 years, but for him, it is a part of his sensibility in some way. But he also notices that this world is changing. It is not unlike what happened with many modern artists in the West. For instance, Degas, who was a great admirer of, let us say, the 18th century French thing and the ballet and so on. But under his very eyes, that world in which he was more at home was changing. And you can see that everything that is being painted by Degas is a Paris that is just dying. So this transformation of one world dying, another taking birth, that is reflected in his later works quite thing. So he is at home in the earlier culture, in his early work, but he also realizes that world is dying in his later works, and that is what makes it rich. And we are all going through transitions. All of us, in some way, replicate that. And that is what learning or looking at Abanindranath really teaches in some way, how to bring that into a work, into a kind of thing. To me, that is quite an important thing.
Sumona, I'm afraid we are out of time now.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to all the speakers. I'm sorry, I think this discussion can go on and on and on because each of you have such a wealth of perspective on Abanindranath. Thank you all for listening, and thank you to the book fair for hosting this wonderful conversation.
Thank you for that scintillating discussion, which could have gone on actually for quite a few more minutes, not few more minutes, for many more minutes. We have some Kolkata Mishti to be given to you by the President.